Joining us now is Mark Weiszer, who covers the Georgia Bulldogs pretty closely. And I imagine that's been a really fun job, Mark, over the last couple of seasons. Thanks for spending a couple minutes with me.
Yeah, no problem. Good to be with you.
Well, talk to me about this year's squad. I mean, what are sort of the positions of strength and what are some of the groupings that need a little bit of improvement as Georgia has just kind of, without a doubt, risen to the top of the college football power rankings?
It's hard to say that there's too many positions that aren't strong, given that they're recruiting at a very high level and back-to-back national champions. Let's start with tight end, which, if you had Brock Bowers, who is probably could have been an NFL first-round pick, after his freshman year, coming back for his third season, that's a great place to start with. And a guy that they get the ball in his hands every which way you can think of, even though he's listed as a tight end. The offensive line is very strong. They have four guys that are on the All-SEC preseason team. And the defense, at every level has guys that are going to be playing at the next level as well. Jamon Dumas-Johnson and Smile London at inside linebacker, kind of continuing the tradition they've had with guys like Roquan Smith, Nakobe Dean, etc.
Talking with Mark Weiszer from the Athens Banner Herald here now, Georgia football. What's the message been like, Mark? Defending one title is one thing, defending two is certainly quite another. Has there been a mantra or a message to this year's group?
Yeah, there's always a mantra. There's always a slogan at Georgia. This year, it's better, never rests, which is something that they took from the All Blacks, which is a New Zealand rugby team. Kirby Smart has an outside consultant that he kind of uses to help with his messaging. So the team spent some time this offseason studying some of the phrases that championship type program used. They don't talk much about a three-peat, at least publicly. Kirby Smart says it's kind of a reset every year, different guys, different culture, different chemistry, but it's certainly out there as a huge goal for the fan base and probably the team as well.
Which players on this year's team would you say are the leaders, vocally or even non-vocally?
Well, I mentioned Jamon Dumas-Johnson earlier. He's probably one of those guys that it's kind of the nature of the inside linebacker position, kind of the quarterback of the defense, and he's known as Pop as his nickname. Kind of looks like an older guy, like a Pop maybe. Otherwise, the center Cedric Van Pran Granger could have gone in the NFL draft as a top 3 round draft pick. He came back, so his third year as a starter. He's definitely one of those guys, and then you have a guy like Lad McConkey, who was underrated as a wide receiver coming out of high school, and he's back for another Georgia season as one of their top threats.
It seems like the general consensus, Mark, is that Georgia has in fact overtaken Alabama as the most powerful sort of school in college football. How do you view that, and does a three-peat do anything to solidify that? In your mind, has it already been solidified that Georgia now has that mantle?
I mean, given the recent history, you can certainly say that. But when you look at Nick Saban's, how many national championships he's stacked up in his career, I think it might be 7 if you include LSU. Kirby Smart has some catching up to do, but Kirby Smart's only 48. And the fact that Georgia's won the last 2 national championships, Alabama didn't make the playoff last year. This is certainly the type of year that would probably solidify Georgia as the top tier of college football, if they're not already. If there's anyone out there that still has some convincing to do.
And you mentioned Pop. Is it a team that's comprised of multiple veterans and leaders that we're going to be seeing here this season? Are we going to see young players have to step into those roles?
Yeah, at Georgia, there's not, you don't see as many senior leaders type necessarily, just because, the top players every year go early in the NFL draft. A guy like Amarius Mims, who's their starting right tackle, he's only started 2 games at Georgia. He was a 5-star recruit. It's probably his last season at Georgia. So you have guys that kind of come in with a lot of pedigree in high school but have to wait their turn. If they're not seen as a guy that will be a starter, they probably transfer out. I think they had about 14 of those guys that left in the transfer portal. You don't need to necessarily be a senior to be a leader in this program. Just kind of do your time in practice and kind of grabbing the culture, and that helps along the way.
What's it been like covering this team, the evolution of this team, Mark? I mean, you're so closely following them from season to season. What's the process been like to watch them blossom into this powerhouse?
Yeah, I mean, you saw it in year two where, it was definitely ahead of schedule. I mean, you're really almost the national champions. You don't lose in overtime to Alabama on a kind of a fluky type of, second and 26 play that ends up being a touchdown with a breakdown in the secondary. You'd already be, this would be a third national championship maybe for Georgia. But, Kirby Smart came here from Alabama with a, very focused mindset and a, serious demeanor, and came here to take over a program that won a lot of games under Mark Richt, but didn't win the big games and didn't get to the national championship game. So he came in here with a blueprint from Alabama, and he's implemented it, and he's gotten all the backing financially and otherwise from the administration.
There's a new offensive coordinator as well this season. What should the expectations be for the offense this season?
Yeah, he's a new offensive coordinator, but an old face at Georgia. Mike Bobo has been here as the offensive coordinator for Mark Richt from 2008 to 14 before he left to be the head coach at Colorado State, then bounced around, coordinator at South Carolina, coordinator at Auburn. Came back last year, was on the support staff, and really had a chance to learn about Todd Monken's system, who's now at the Baltimore Ravens as the offensive coordinator. So I'm not looking for too many big changes. He's implementing what has worked at Georgia and what he learned last year. He'll have his own touches, I'm sure. The personnel's changed. You don't have an elusive quarterback like Stetson Bennett. You don't have a mammoth tight end as a blocker like Darnell Washington. So a little bit different personnel. And Todd Monken seemed to have the magic as a play caller, so we'll see what Mike Bobo can do in that regard.
There's been a little bit of criticism of the schedule, Mark, just maybe in terms of strength of schedule. What's your reaction to that, and has Kirby Smart said anything about the schedule?
Yeah, it's kind of a fluke. I mean, the schedule is soft because they're going to be playing week 2 at Oklahoma, and when Oklahoma joined the SEC, kind of canceled that game because it's going to be on the future schedule, in a year or two. In the conference. So instead of Oklahoma going there to week 2, they have Ball State coming in, which is not an equivalent type of game to add to the schedule. So Kirby Smart has really scheduled difficult games with Florida State, UCLA, Texas in the future. Now Texas also come in the SEC, so that's probably not going to pan out either. They had Clemson and Oregon to start last couple of years, so they're not really ducking anyone. It was kind of just the nature of Oklahoma joining the SEC.
I'm sure it doesn't get old for you, having spent so much time covering Georgia and now with them being so good every single year. But as a lover of college football, to watch the landscape shift and change the way that it has, almost to have this sort of NFL B top tier and then everybody else, do you think that there should be more parity somehow? The SEC has traditionally been such a powerhouse down south, but I mean, do we need to think a little bit differently about trying to figure out a way to make it more competitive and get other teams involved, in your opinion?
Well, I think NIL is bringing, a sort of level of parity. I mean, Georgia just lost a 5-star defensive lineman that they were recruiting out of Missouri. And Missouri, could have come up with a very good NIL package. The high schools in Missouri have a law that is more advantageous to the high school players than Georgia right now. Georgia lost a recruit to Florida State that was from Buford, Georgia, just down the road. And I don't know, NIL probably played a role there too. So, whether it's going to change the landscape of college football, I think the teams that have always been very good, your Georgias, your Alabamas, Southern Cal. I mean, Bear Alexander was a guy that was at Georgia last year, would have been a starter this year, perhaps. He's at Southern Cal now. Maybe he had an NIL opportunity there that was greater at Georgia as well as playing time. So the transfer portal NIL, I think, will change the landscape, already has, and we'll see how much.
If there were weaknesses for Georgia positionally on either side of the ball, what are they this season?
It's hard to say. I mean, Carson Beck hasn't started a game in college football. He's been a backup at Georgia, hasn't played significant snaps in, crunch time. And you're replacing a 2-time national championship quarterback in Stetson Bennett, who, ran for 10 touchdowns last year, mostly in the red zone. Carson Beck doesn't, as far as we know, doesn't run as well as Stetson Bennett. You're replacing a kicker in Jack Podlesny that kind of picked up the torch from Rodrigo Blankenship. Defensive line, you lost a top 10 NFL draft pick in Jalen Carter. I don't know if they have a guy that's going to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL next year. So those are some areas that Georgia will learn, as the weeks go on in the season, exactly what they have there.
And Mark, before I let you go, what are some predictions, week one predictions, season prediction for this team based on the strength of schedule that we were talking about and just how talented they are as they continue to reload?
Well, I mean, the first game is UT Martin, so that's an FCS program. Because Georgia's playing, breaking in their new offensive coordinator, I think they might put up a big number. I mean, it's not going to surprise me if they score 70. Now, they're kind of beat up at running back. Maybe they don't play their best guys. They hold them out for a couple weeks against South Carolina. We'll see. But it's hard not to pick Georgia with the schedule to go 12-0. There could be a game that sneaks up on you. Missouri last year almost beat Georgia on the road. Kentucky's given Georgia, battles in recent years. Maybe they come into Athens and do more. But Tennessee is the one game that everyone has circled, which is in November in Knoxville.
And just if there are any freshmen coming in that are expected to make an impact, I know you said players don't stick around too long and you've got NFL caliber athletes year in and year out, but are there any young players that we haven't talked about that you have your eye on particularly that you think could be a difference maker or an impact player heading into this season?
Yeah, I mean, they always have guys. Jordan Hall is a defensive lineman that's kind of flashed at the G-Day spring game. Sam Mpemba is an outside linebacker that was really highly recruited as well. They need a pass rusher there. They lost Nolan Smith, who was a first-round pick of the Eagles. They lost Robert Beal, who was a mid-round pick. Those are some of the guys. And then one of the kickers that's coming in as well as competing. We don't know exactly who the starter is yet, but he could be the guy as well. So, they sign a top 3 class every year, and there's always, an assortment of those guys that end up, carving out roles and making an impact.
Mark Weiszer from the Athens Banner-Herald covering Georgia football. I'm sure it'll be another exciting season for you. Thanks so much for spending a couple minutes with us.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Carolyn.